Okay, so a couple things for next Thursday that you need to be prepared for are generating your own data sets, both for correlation and for a test of differences. And then you are going to run your data sets and interpret the values. Okay, so here is our data set generator. Depending on the question, whether it is for correlation or for t-test, is what is going to determine what chapter you use here. For correlation, it will be chapter 12. For your t-test, it's going to depend on the instructions of the question. It could be a one sample t-test, it could be a paired samples t-test, or it could be an independent samples t-test. I have samples of all three of those to show you quickly. You will hit generate data set and then it's going to come up with your numbers. For the Pearson, for the correlation, you are going to need to use the Pearson correlation coefficient calculator. You are going to be taking screenshots and moving them from this onto a Word doc. You are then going to interpret the values. I believe that they will tell you, depending on whether you're able to read them or not, there are two values that I would specifically be looking for. One is R and one is your p-value, and you will need to write a sentence or two interpreting the values. Okay, so again, I ran an independent samples t-test. Let me pull up my Jamovi's though, and let's look at the tests that we have. That's a paired samples. One sample t-test. This would be over here under your data set. One sample t-test, if I ask you to do one sample on your final quiz, it will come right here to chapter 8. This is set at 10. You will need to follow the directions for whatever number I ask you to use. You'll hit generate data set and then it's going to give you a data set. You will pop over here to Jamovi, enter your data. For a one sample t-test, you only need one variable. You do not need B, you do not need C. Remember, we always run our descriptives first. If I tell you to use 30 samples and you have an N29, you are going to have to go back and say, ooh, I have at least one missing, or I have one missing, and fill it in order for you to get your data. When we analyze the data, you are going to move your dependent variable, which is going to be the numbered variable, over. It's going to give you a student's T, your T statistic, degrees of freedom, which is your number minus 1, since we are only talking about one sample, and your p-value. Over here, remember, since a one sample t-test is, we are comparing it to either a hypothesized or sometimes a known value, we must change the test value. I will give you the hypothesized or the known value in the directions. Along with this, you are going to want to pull up mean difference and confidence intervals. So descriptives, your test, you are going to tell me the two things that let you know whether your results are or are not statistically significant. You may have a question on a paired samples t-test. Your data. So a paired samples t-test is what we use if we are, we give a survey prior to implementing treatment, and then we give a second survey because we want to see if our treatment was effective. And so A, and you can label it whatever you'd like, A will be your pre-treatment numbers, B will be your post-treatment numbers. Again, over here, you are going to go to Chapter 9, Paired Samples t-test. Again, whatever number I provide, generate your data set. It is going to give you a survey time 1 and a survey time 2. I may tell you to do it in like small counts. You will just need to pay attention to the directions. Going to come over here, modify your variables as needed. Might be different depending on your directions. And again, we don't need C, I just left it there. Okay, so we go into analyze our data. First thing that we do is check our descriptives, which is going to give us the number, the mean, standard deviation. I might ask you questions about that. And then we run a paired samples t-test. In order to run a paired samples t-test, we choose both variables to pair them, pull them over. We are going to look at the mean difference and the confidence interval. And again, you are going to tell me how you know whether these are statistically significant or not. I may ask for a descriptives plot. Again, so Quan asked the other day, when our confidence interval, these legs here, when they cross, so like if this A was all the way up here and there's like overlap, we can generally state that our results are not significant, that they will contain a 0. In this case, our results are significant. You will need to tell me how you know that, how I just knew that. And if I ask you to pull up a plot, you will do that and tell me from the plot, like if I say pull up a quantile plot, how do we know that these results are or are not significant? We would not use a quantile on there, but those are some of the plots that we might use. Lastly, if I ask for an independent samples t-test, again, generate your data set. So this is, you're interested in differences in count due to tenure. You want to know if employees hired more than 6 months ago have lower mean counts than employees hired less than 6 months ago. So we have our two data sets here, less than 6 months, longer than 6 months. You're going to enter your data in Jamovi. You will notice here, we reviewed this in class. We have grouping variables. You are going to need to remember how to do your grouping variables. And then we have our data for those grouping variables. When we analyze, we come over to t-tests, independent samples t-test. We enter our dependent variable and then our grouping variable. We will probably be interested in mean differences and confidence intervals. We are going to be interested in descriptives and descriptive plots. So that is going to give us this data. Our statistic, our degrees of freedom. So in this, we have two groups. That means our degrees of freedom is our sample minus 2. Our p-value, mean difference, confidence interval, upper, lower. Here are our descriptives, and here is our plot. Be prepared for any or all of these. So again, correlation for a test of differences on your test on Thursday. Be prepared to explain to me how you know whether your results are statistically significant or not. That will be one of the biggest parts of the quiz on Thursday, interpretation.